Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Mr. Anonymous, and here's what he has to say. Hi Sandman, please keep me anonymous. I've been a long-time listener and have tossed some brain fodder your direction to get your thoughts, and you have not disappointed. I do believe you really understand the issue of mental health that we are facing, having been given a PhD in it from a couple of women that taught me what NPD and HPD really are. Unfortunately, I decided I wanted children, and we got married and had kids right away using the most advanced science that money can buy. Creating a boy and a girl with the desired eye color and prevention of possible genetic diseases that it might carry. I was not disappointed by the results. It was postpartum that struck her within a few months of giving birth, and everything went sideways, and she threatened to kill herself. She was in danger to herself and others, and I wasted no time calling the police, and they decided to take her away on her first 5150. A week later, she came out pissed as hell, and I had to call the police once again, but this time the police team came specialized in mental health issues. They promptly took her away again to the hospital, and the doctors kept her for an additional 17 days against her will. She finally met the low watermark of not being a danger to herself and others, and in her daily calls of anger and rage against other people in her life, was released and pissed. It was at this point I filed for a legal separation to establish custody, as well as prevent any divorce lottery windfall. I also requested and received a restraining order against her and agreed to drop it after she had a full evaluation from a psychiatrist. Before the evaluation was completed, I agreed to marriage counseling, and I mentioned that the psychiatrist said she had histrionic behavior, and I am basically waiting now for a full report. She dismissed this as normal incorrect descriptions of Latinas and played into her mental disorder. You see, most people have never actually met one of these people that have been diagnosed by professionals. Faith is not required once you've met one of these types of people. I won't bore you with the details, but many men have run into this, and they never knew it. I will leave you a couple of great web links at the bottom for others to validate that I'm not actually crazy. I ended up getting a full psychiatric evaluation from her doctors for the record, just to make sure that I was not part of this crazy. And in the end, I have my children, I have no fear of restraining orders or alimony. I have 2 nannies that are awesome, and a career in business that's doing rather well. It is my hope that more men stand up to crazy, man up, and call the cops when crazy strikes. Well, Mr. Anonymous, thanks for sharing your story about your crazy postpartum ex-wife and her other mental health issues. I'm really sorry you got involved with a Latin woman. Latin women often use the excuse that they're fiery, and the ones I've dated before, they would always be on the verge of lashing out emotionally when I did something they disapproved of. I'm sorry to say this, but they aren't fiery, they're being emotionally and sometimes physically abusive. And the women I dated didn't know that the moment they acted like that, I would walk out the door. I learned very young and instinctively not to deal with bipolar, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorder women. When women bark orders to me, I lash out in anger because they're actually violating my free will. They usually do it for no good reason, just because they're moody, and that's their excuse. That gets me past their shit test, but shatters my peace of mind for many hours and sometimes up to a day or two. The first woman I dated like that briefly in my mid-20s appeared nice and behaved very submissively at first, but then a week later the controlling selfish behavior ended up showing up. A woman like her didn't even wait 6 months or a year until I was actually in love with her and emotionally hooked before releasing the hound, so to speak. It was immediate, and I immediately left the relationship. I can't deal with emotional abuse, and you shouldn't have to either. Mr. Anonymous, in your case, you had to fight this woman to keep custody of your kids. But I would suggest to any man that is actually dealing with such a woman not to deal with them in the first place. They're so badly damaged emotionally, and there isn't really much you can do for them, and you just need to move on, buckaroo, put old Yeller down, and move on with your life. If you let a woman abuse you emotionally and mentally, and you know that she's doing it, then I'm sorry to say this, but the odds are that you don't love yourself enough, because if you did, then you wouldn't actually love a woman that treats you this cruelly. Mr. Anonymous, I also put the links in the description that you sent me for people to read if they wanted to, but I will discuss the third one called, Why is Narcissism Increasing Among Young Americans? The article says that young people in America today have an inflated sense of self. Gee, where could this be coming from? Possibly Tinder, social media, status items like purses, and even consumer culture. It also says that narcissism is indifference to others, but I don't think indifference is the right word. It's more like a complete lack of empathy, compassion, or kindness, or even the attempt to pretend to be like that. Narcissists are unhappy because the world fails to recognize their so-called superiority. But in reality, the world is probably trying to get away from narcissists because of their unkind treatment of the world. The article doesn't mention gender or sex differences in narcissism. Women are naturally more narcissistic than men because they are biologically more hardwired to be the centers of attention. Unless you're a gay man like Oscar Wilde, you're not going to be dressing in fur coats and dapper hats trying to become an attention hog. Most men wear muted colors, don't show their emotions, and tend to just melt into the background of life silently, going about their important business. My theory is that as women become more narcissistic thanks to technology, men are just going to have to look and act more narcissistic themselves because they're trying to attract women to themselves as well. There is healthy narcissism and healthy self-esteem, standing up for yourself and your reputation and not letting yourself get bullied. Then there's unhealthy narcissism where you attack others because you fear that they'll attack you at some point in the future. So you strike first in a preemptive way if you're a narcissist. If you're criticizing someone in a bad way and they've never actually done anything negative to you, then what you're trying to do is take some of the other person's attention away, or perhaps you're jealous somehow. A good example of this was Angry MGTOW a while back. He was insulting me 2 or 3 months ago. I thought he would actually stop and get tired of attacking me, but he didn't. When I finally criticized him, I wasn't lashing out because of narcissism, but because he was running off his mouth over and over again, spreading rumors and attacking me for no good reason. When I finally criticized him once, that triggered him enough to make a 1-hour rant video and then another 30-minute video after that. Now he's continuing to lash out long after that because he needs the attention. So you can see that some men can be narcissists as well. But getting back to narcissistic women, we know exactly who they are, and they all want attention. That's why MGTOW is so powerful, Mr. Anonymous, because it teaches us about female nature to get us to see how women use men for attention fixes for their narcissistic supply. In your case, I think you would have been better off hiring a surrogate mother and creating a child that way. You're very lucky you didn't get screwed over by a so-called sane woman instead of getting together with an insane woman that ended up screwing yourself. To use a quote from the film Shawshank Redemption, it sounds to me like you crawled through a mile of shit and you came out clean on the other side. You should count yourself very lucky. You might be onto something with your experience with this woman. Perhaps you've actually identified some type of new mating strategy for men. Maybe a guy could have kids with a crazy narcissistic woman, knowing that she's violent and suicidal, and record her outbursts on camera, and then eventually stage everything so that child services take the kids away from her and basically reward you with sole custody. But of course, that would be extremely risky. In the past, if this happened, say 100 to 150 years ago, the woman would have been sent to the sanatorium or mental asylum for electroshock therapy, and then the husband would get to keep the kids as well as the responsibility for taking care of them. Back in the day when only one parent ended up working, he could actually afford nannies much the same way that you can today, Mr. Anonymous. So society had a way of dealing with this particular situation. But today it's more difficult if a mother is suicidal and has postpartum depression. Not every guy out there has the luxury to afford one nanny, let alone 2 of them. The vast majority of women out there are not in any physical danger to themselves or their children. Instead, the real danger they pose is destroying the life of the father to those kids. That's the primary victim of a woman's narcissism, her relationship partner, because he's the closest one to her. I remember the first time in my life when I saw a man get yelled at by a histrionic, narcissistic, bipolar woman. My parents used to live next door to the nicest Italian neighbor ever. He used to take my brother and me for rides in his Mustang Cobra back in the 1980s. We would go fast down the highway and burn rubber. But he would constantly get kicked out of his own house by his wife, and she would be yelling at him from the porch. I didn't need the television show Cops while I was growing up, because the neighbors looked like they were acting out the whole show next door. But that's where I learned not to be like that guy. I saw the defeated and worried look on his face as the wife peeked her head through the window and started yelling at him, and the whole neighborhood could see what was going on, as she was publicly shaming him for something he supposedly did. But as far as I could tell, the only crime he was guilty of was going to work as a salesman and providing for his family, while the wife stayed at home with their son and daughter and 2 cats. This woman was actually so evil that when they moved away, she abandoned the cats outside in the cold Canadian winter. A few years later, I was canvassing for the Cancer Society in the neighborhood and volunteering when I saw one of the cats inside a woman's house. I asked her where she got that cat from, and she told me that she rescued it from outside because it was almost dead. She nursed it back to health. This guy's wife had zero empathy for her husband, pets, and I'm surprised her children actually grew up, although the son appeared to have some sort of developmental challenges. He didn't speak very much and was always afraid of everything. You would be too if your mother was destroying your father every chance she got, and yet they're still together after 35 years. I couldn't be that guy for 35 days, let alone 35 years. But many men stay in such relationships because they love their wife more than they actually love themselves or even their children. The woman comes first, and you sacrifice everything, including your manhood and your sanity, and even your own children's sanity, for such a narcissistic woman. I'm really glad for your sake, Mr. Anonymous, that you didn't end up like my old neighbor. It's tragic when as a society we don't have the mandatory checks of people's mental health before they're deemed to be fit to be parents. On second thought, then the social justice warriors and feminists would also hijack that as well, and the only women procreating would be those with narcissistic personality disorder. I don't know for sure, but I think that nature gave women an evolutionary advantage by verbally beating men down and destroying their egos, so they could subjugate men to do their bidding. It must have worked in certain tribes and cultures. I know with me it'll never be able to work because I didn't spend my life building my self-confidence up from the depths of a gutter to have some woman put me back in the trash. But maybe some men love their women enough to be abused like that their entire lives. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks again, Mr. Anonymous, for your donation and topic request. Also, don't forget to check out the MGTOW mystery link, as well as like this video. As for everyone else out there, please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day keeps the borderline beauty queens away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.